Good afternoon, everybody. It's Paul Furey here. It's lovely to see you all. We're just still waiting for people to flood in the door. It's great to have your company this Friday lunchtime. The sun is out. It's the beginning of the weekend. Well, it will be in a few hours, unless you actually work for a living, in which case you're going to be working probably into the evening. But it's yeah, it's great to see you, and I'm really looking forward to today's webinar, not least of all because I'm talking to and about one of my favorite topics, to one of my favorite experts, and also a jolly nice chap who knows a terrific amount about sound. So as people come in the door, I don't want to start on the material, but maybe I can say a little bit about how webinars work, or ours work, just on the off chance that you haven't gone to many or any of ours before. You'll be relieved to hear that you are muted, so we can't hear you slurping your lattes or eating your lunch. That's absolutely fine. And of course, neither can we see you. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so if you have a particularly laborious or involved question, what you can do when we get to that bit at around about 1:05 is to shove your hand up, metaphorically speaking, on screen, and then we'll find some way of freeing your microphone up. That'll probably be Nicola who's doing the clever stuff, and then we can hear your question. But otherwise, you can type your questions into the question tab, which is in your little control panel there. The idea of these webinars is to really get you thinking about something. And today that thing is sound and how conversations sound. And Peter James, my guest who I'll introduce you to when everybody's arrived, he and I have been talking about this for quite a long time. And the reason I think we carried on talking about sound is, well, obviously it's Peter's profession and he knows a lot about it. But I particularly like the way that he talks about it. He's not just a super microphone geek / scientist, etc. Peter, I think, has something really important to say about the importance of sound to people, what it does for us. And so that's why he's here with me today. We thought it would make a really good conversation, and hopefully you'll go away with something not just to think about, but something that you'll actually do, that you'll make a change if we manage to persuade you just how critical sound is, maybe particularly now to our existence. Hopefully within the next few months, and I'm talking frankly into next year, we will all start to see more of each other. But for now, sound and vision is it. So there are still a few people coming in the door, and then we will indeed make a start in give or take a minute. We've got a cracking session today with lots to listen to and to see. So I want to make sure that nobody actually misses out on that. Well, perhaps whilst there's still people walking in, this is a good time to introduce Peter. So I'm going to chuck my webcam on as well. Peter, welcome. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Paul. I'm not sure if I can live up to such a wonderful introduction, but I'm going to do my best.
You look a lot healthier. You've obviously got a much better webcam than I have, because I look as though I've just walked through a whitewash shower, and you're looking healthy and colourful. So it's I am feeling fine. It's just I just don't look fine. But today is all about sound anyway, isn't it? I think what we probably do now, it's 32 minutes past, quite a few people. If there are late joiners, we can always go back on ourselves and re-explain something. But what essentially you and I are going to be doing today is covering quite a few different topics, and like, you know, why is sound important? What happens when it goes wrong? What do people do or not do? And why good sound makes sense. And then ultimately we're going to end up with some tips for people, aren't we? And maybe, you know, some pointers that they can do both without any further investment financially, and then maybe if they really get the bit between their teeth, maybe we can give them a few tips about where they might look for some solutions. So here we are. Why don't we make a start? So Peter, let's start with the really obvious question. What's so important about sound?
Thank you. Just a very small question. It's a big part of our lives, Paul. I think that, you know, when we look for things that entertain us and how we use our recreational time, sound is a big part of that. I think it's hard to go anywhere today without seeing pretty much everyone or every other person wearing headphones, earphones, listening to music or teaching themselves a new skill, a new language. But it's where we choose to spend so much of our time. You know, theatres, concerts, festivals, watching films, that kind of stuff. And sound is a big part of that. But also we're conscious of negative sound. We kind of were aware of that in our environment, and we have the ability to tune it out sometimes. And that's a big factor of what I want to talk about today, is how much we tune certain sounds that we don't like out of conversations. And sometimes we do complain about it. You know, where there's money involved with a theatre ticket or cinema or going to a festival or a concert, we do often speak up. If we don't speak up and ask for a refund or for some kind of compensation, we'll tell our friends how bad it was.
Yeah, I once went to a I was with my mother and I was in the theatre when I was a small boy. I must have been 8 or 9 years old. We were sat down, we were watching a play, and to my horror, this old lady behind me shouted out in pure science, "Speak up." So I've seen it in action. Now, I don't know how much people do that now, but I could not believe she'd done it. And indeed, the actor did speak up.
It does happen. I mean, but sound's an emotional thing. It does touch us. There was real emotion in sound and music and experiences. But there are things that we often forget about in pure conversation. We've become so used to telephone level quality for occasional conversations that have become more frequent over time. And now they're becoming more prolonged. These interactions are far more prolonged. And we've kind of got used to, you know, what our brain does for us in actually getting through with relatively poor sound. But of course, I would argue it's equally important in conversations like this one and other parts of our daily life to sound great. And we often don't. We don't see it in the same emotional way. None of us get excited about, you know, a conference call in the way we do about going to a festival or seeing a theatre show. But the importance of sounding good is just as important.
Yes, and now, of course, in a way that none of us could have predicted, since March, sound has suddenly become such an important part of our lives that and it's important not just as you've described as part of a leisure activity, which is always indispensable. I can't think of a single leisure activity which doesn't involve sound in a major way. But now that work is happening through some of the same media channels as leisure, and because we're doing it for hours and hours, all of a sudden it's become even more important that we get our sound act together at work. We're now getting, well, maybe, I don't know, I was going to say we're getting fussier about sound, or choosier, but maybe not choosy enough. And I suppose that's our thesis in this webinar, isn't it, Peter? That we're trying to get you to become choosier, to become fussier and more assertive about sound, because it has such an impact. For example, we need to be able to pick up on vocal cues, and when we're all together, I would be able to hear you either hesitate or draw breath. I'd actually be able to see you and your body language, which would tell me when you were about to say something, and has already happened in this conversation, which didn't happen when you and I were together 3 weeks ago, sitting face to face in a restaurant. We made space for each other because we could see that the other person was ready to talk. Here, like has already happened, I had to interrupt you because you didn't notice, not because you're not observant, just because it was so much harder to sense. So feelings tend to go out, hesitation goes out, all the little cues that we need to be able to have a normal conversation. It's largely gone.
Absolutely. And there are some things that we do that our brain does that are not present at distance. You know, our ability to filter out unwanted noise is very different in person. You know, our two ears do a lot of directional measurement, so we can identify where sound is coming from that we like and where sound is coming from that we don't like, and our brain filters those things out. But when you have one sound source and one sound source alone on a call like this, then everything comes through the same way, and anything that's unwanted or unnatural becomes highly distracting, highly distracting.
So this is a good point, I think, to introduce a little bit of the physics, because I'm actually a closet geek, and I'd really like it if you could just describe very briefly. I mean, this is a very complex, in a sense, diagram, but this is the polar pattern of different kinds of microphones. Say something about this, because this is the first part of learning to do something better with the equipment that you already have, even if you don't want to spend any more money.
Okay, so I'll try and make this little bit of tech as simple as possible. So these are 3 microphone pickup types, and really they're just reflecting on directional microphones and omnidirectional, meaning a microphone that picks up in one direction only or favors a direction, or a microphone that picks up in every direction. So the top 2 images, the one on the left is a directional mic, and that indicates how we measure sound around the microphone. That picks up to the front. So just to give you a visual demonstration, this is that type of microphone. I typically talk in the front of it, and if I talk that way, you won't hear very much at all. I can do that here, actually. I've got a microphone here, so I'm in the front of this microphone, and I can turn it around and talk at the back, and you're probably not hearing very much. So fairly obvious what's going on there. And as I talk around it, you'll notice from the side, it's a little bit quieter than it is at the front. So if we did a similar graph to what you see on the left, that's how it would measure very similarly. What's at the bottom is even more direction, like what we call a super directional or super cardioid is its true word. And as you try and squeeze in its pickup pattern, you see this kind of pickup at the back. It starts to have a little bit of rear pickup as you try and make it narrow at the front. There are some physical limitations in science, but basically that's what we're measuring. And ultimately microphones are those 2 things, picking up everything or picking up something. And in professional terms, that's what we are trying to achieve, is to pick up everything you want and nothing you don't want. That's the simplest way to define it.
You used a really interesting phrase with me, which I thought I'd actually, oh, here we go, yeah. And that is minimum conscious effort. So the trick for that a microphone designer is trying to bring about is that the people listening aren't having to try very hard to enjoy an authentic sound that's coming from the person they're supposed to be listening to, or the group or the musicians. They just kind of don't know that there's anything between them and the producer of the sound.
Absolutely, and that's what happens when you're face to face in conversation with someone. Everything you've mentioned, those cues are there, those physical cues, visual cues as well, and so much of that is missing. So what we're trying to do is to make sure you capture all of a voice or all of the sound that you want and very little of something else. And I didn't mention this earlier. I mean, our area where we're most known and most visible is in those very loud environments where someone's singing with a band around them or something like that, where you're trying to capture that person's voice and not pick up the rest of the band and do that differently. So there's an art and a lot of science to that, but it's just as applicable to what we're doing now. There's a lot of money involved in conversations like this that are taking place all over the world every day. And I think it deserves just as much attention to detail to get this right as it does if you're on stage at Wembley Stadium.
And there's I don't know if I bring this up a bit later. I'll save that for there's a particular story you told me when we first met about a study, or you'd done some research on how much conversations or bad sound costs. We'll come back to that, because what I'd like to get into now is the demonstration. So this, I think, is really the cool bit about how the different things, or what the different things sound like. So you're going to talk us through using, I think, probably at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of microphone.
Yeah, so I'm just going to use some typical things. What I'll say before I start is that I'm just working from home today. I've actually left my window open on purpose to try and pick up any outside background noise. And there's nothing treated in this room to make me sound special. So what you'll hear hopefully is very natural and in line with everything you would normally experience around,
Yes.
Working from home.
Indeed,
in a non-specialized environment.
People who come to the webinars a lot will notice that I'm not in the sound recording room that I'm normally behind, which has got 58 decibel glass, It's beautifully sound treated. It's got many layers of acoustic plasterboard. So I purposefully came out front where I am here is big high ceiling, tiled floors. So the very worst environment, just to show that actually it is possible in any environment to make sound work. You don't have to be in the perfect environment. So anyway, so I think you're on the MV7.
I'm on the MV7. I won't do a sales pitch on it except to say it's a new microphone in our range, optimized for this type of application actually, but anyone podcasting, recording straight to a computer, that's what this is for, and good for this conference call as well. So I'm going to switch to a few different things that are more common. And what I will say is that most people's brains are, you'll adapt to what you're listening to, but there's effort to do that. And hopefully what you'll hear as we go through these is how your brain starts to switch some effort on as we change through these things, and how maybe hopefully more comfortable it feels as we get back to something that sounds more natural. So I'm first going to go to what in my tree of microphones Windows defines as high definition audio device. To you and me, this is my laptop microphone. So here is my high definition audio device, which I think a lot of us have probably heard conversations a little bit like this, very echoey, probably quite grainy. I don't know how you want to describe it.
Are you sure? Because that still sounds quite good to me. It doesn't sound as abysmal as it normally does.
Oh, I've switched the wrong thing actually. I've just switched what I'm listening to, not what you're listening to. Here we go to other high definition device. This one, this is what you really wanted to hear.
Like it.
There you are. I know you've been looking forward to that. Just trying to fool you then, actually. So this is the laptop. The microphone on the laptop is just slightly to my right. It's not underneath the camera that I'm looking at on my main screen. It's just slightly to the side, but it is in front of me. So that's my laptop microphone, high definition audio device it's referred to. And it is designed to just be embedded in the laptop. But the more I talk, the more you'll start to get aligned to it. Your brain will figure things out. But that's still effort. It's still effort for your brain to decide that. And you need to pay attention for what I'm saying to kind of continue that conversation. So I'm going to switch to something that's maybe slightly better, a standalone device, and to my webcam. So now I'm on my webcam. It's an HP webcam. I'm sure some of you on the call may have one of these, just a standalone device with a microphone embedded inside it, and it sits on top of my screen. So it's just alongside the camera picking me up now. So a little bit more direct, probably a little bit echoey, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And other noise coming through.
Although there's one thing that you said which I think we should emphasize, and that is that because our brains are so clever at filtering, we've got an entire mixing desk, we've got Adobe Audition in our heads, and it means that, as you say, with effort our brains can learn to rehear. It's so terribly clever, but we mustn't underestimate how much effort that actually takes. It's a bit like an auditory version of eye strain.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes it out of you.
So I'm going to switch to another one now. I'm going to put this on. So I'm going to switch to a USB headset. It's a common brand of IT devices. I'm sure some of you may have these. And the good thing about headsets is that it means whatever you're listening to is pretty much exclusive to you. So other people don't hear your conversation, which is why they're so popular. But the microphone still has the potential to pick everything else up. I'm going to put this on, and I'm going to switch to, here we go. So hopefully now you're hearing me on this headset, USB headset mic, fairly common peripheral device. I'm sure it sounds different to what's on top of the screen, and you can still hear me.
It's not as offensive, and it's much clearer, but it's a very closed, just rather basic sound, but it's pretty accurate. There's a mistake that of course you're not making, which many people do, which is if you put your mic really close to your mouth, as you would never do.
Like this, just for emphasis.
Yeah. So there's two things. One is your beard, so which crunches against it. But there's somebody I sometimes have to talk to, and they always kind of wear it much too close, and they pop the microphone like mad, which is awful. But you're not, and actually that looks like that headset actually stops you doing that.
Yeah, it works. You're hearing me. My voice is coming across, so we have a conversation. There's maybe some detail lost, and it could be fatiguing. What's particularly fatiguing about this option, though, is that maybe for the occasional conference call, this was fine, but now we tend to be doing this all day long. Having something stuck in your ears isn't always everyone's favorite device. So I'm going to switch from this, because I'm not loving having something on my ears either. And I'm going to go back to the Shure MV7.
Have you got the other Shure microphone? Only if you've got a second for the 58. The one. So well, actually, I can do that bit, can't I? Because I'm using one of a very similar one to one of these, which is this one's a 58 or a beta 58, which actually is more, it's more directional, and the output's a bit more punchy, isn't it?
It's even more directional. And just to put some emphasis on that, the directionality of something which is very, very focused forward just means there's lots less pickup of other noises. So you get much more of the voice and much less of anything else. So that's what Paul has. So I'm back on the MV7. Hopefully the distinction as I've gone through this is quite obvious in terms of the quality and the scale of pickup. What I'm going to do very quickly is just jump back to my high definition audio device, because I messed it up the first time round in transition, and then switch back to this afterwards, just to give you a sense of how our brains align, and hopefully there's a sense that you can hear this more clearly and it's more natural to listen to. And just switch back one more time to my laptop phone, which should now be back onto laptop microphone. So I'm not changing the way I speak. I'm not trying to raise my voice to do anything unusual, just to speak naturally. So you're hearing the difference. And I will now switch back to the MV7 in front of me, which I think is now back on.
So, okay, so we getting a call now. Even on our less favorite microphones, it wasn't that bad, was it? I mean, it was intelligible. But let's say somebody is talking off mic, and or their sound is just really awful. I mean, their high fidelity audio device, or whatever their laptop maker has called it, is really offensive. How do we handle that? Because there's a social problem, isn't it? One of the reasons that we don't say anything is because seniority gets in the way, or maybe politeness. We don't want to be a pain. We don't want to waste time. And so we let each other off the hook. We're prepared to adapt. So how do you handle it when you're with colleagues or when you're talking to clients in your day job?
Yeah, you really have to encourage politeness. Yeah, I think what's common is that people, ask if you can be heard. Hey, can you hear me? And someone says yes, and we leave it at that. That there's no sense of what quality can you hear? Is it acceptable? Is it grainy? Are you just about hearing me? People don't often give an indication of the quality they're receiving. And of course, if it then goes bad, that someone leans into a microphone and says, "Can you hear me?" and you say yes, and they sit back and face the other way. It's actually quite hard sometimes to tell people, well, it was fine when you asked me, but now you've actually gone back to typing on your keyboard. I can't hear you anymore. That's pretty common. We hear that a lot. But there's also just a bit of human nature about this, is that we all kind of accept what we're given, and it's odd to me. So a very, very simple story. I once asked someone in a large organization, there's or auditors actually in London, I won't say which one, and he said how he'd been in conference calls end of year around the world, and just how he hated conference calls. And I said, what do you hate about them? They said, well, everything. He says, it's just tiresome, but often it's I can't hear people, the room sounds bad, and and I just don't. It's just not enjoyable. And I said, well, do you ever complain about it? Do you ever ask them to change it? Well, no, not really. Just don't do that. And I said, well, how do you know that what you send is any better? And his response was, well, no one's ever complained. So well, you never complain, and they never complain. It will never get any better, will it? So it was a telling moment that none of us do. And yet we all experience this. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It's tiresome. And a lot of that tiresome is bad sound quality. It's the effort required to listen.
But it's subtle, isn't it? And this is all very new. Well, Zoom and other platforms have never had it so good. And in fact, didn't really take off, didn't really have the pickup that their marketing teams had hoped for until March. And then it's just gone absolutely nuts, and their share prices and so on and so forth have gone fantastically. But we haven't yet got used to having a conversation about the way a conversation sounds. Much as in my day job with my team, getting boards and executive teams to pause a conversation that's going badly because the content has created some angst, frustration, annoyance. getting people to stop the conversation and to talk about the quality of the conversation or the feelings of in the room is analogous to talking about poor sound. So people are having to learn, we're having to learn to have a different kind of conversation, to talk about the talk. And sound it's a similarly awkward, slightly embarrassing issue that we think we shouldn't waste time on, I think.
Absolutely. Just add one thing very quickly, Paul, and that's that the holy grail of conference calls and meetings is to replicate what it's like to be in a room together over distance. And whilst we could argue forever about what's missing from that, if the one thing you can make very, very close to the original is sound, you can get sound sent to the other end at close to the original level. You can't replicate someone being in the room with you, but you can send better sound. And typically we don't. We send that echoey, grainy, not so good sound, and actually adopt some pretty bad habits as well. We'd never get away with looking over this way whilst having a conversation with you if you're in the room with me.
Yeah,
it would be very rude.
we have a little joke in my family now. I'm sure it's the same for many people who are watching this. So sometimes what we'll do, just for the hell of it, we'll start talking to each other and say, do you know what I mean? And purposefully taking our gaze over their shoulders, which we think is hilarious because it's just what happens every day. Like you, I'm you know, most people's webcams are going up their noses because they're on their laptops, and so there is a visual. We're all having to become sort of TV personalities, aren't we? You know, talk in the right direction and look into the right camera. And
Absolutely.
that's a lot to do. I want to come on to 5 top tips that we've lined up in our thinking together about this. 5 ways that people, and 4 of which don't need any money at all. So that's the good news. So let's get on to that. So the first one is about, you know, reasonable precautions, isn't it? It's about checking that you're sending something that is worth listening to, but it's reasonably pleasant to listen to.
Absolutely. Simplest thing is just to check how you sound. And if you have the ability to record a conference call, a lot of the devices today and different platforms have a record function, record yourself and listen back to it. But also ask a friend, just dial in with a colleague or a trusted friend and ask how you sound. You know, try some different options. If you've got different options, different headsets or laptop, find out how your high definition audio device sounds, but also use it the way that you would use it. You know, do look at do actually, you know, look at the microphone and actually be in the position. Sorry, I'll rewind that. Do use it the way you would use it. Don't go out of your way to go 1 2 1 2 testing. How do I sound? Because you won't actually be in a conference call that way. So try and be as natural as possible, and check in with people. Ask people first. Don't wait for them to ask to tell you you sound bad. Do actually check on those calls first.
So, and the second one, and this is my particular bugbear, people popping their microphones, and I just think, you know, you're not Gene Kranz, that very famous guy who obviously came to the fore during the Apollo 13 crisis and many other launches at NASA. But you can see his microphone. I just thought he's a perfect example of someone who has his microphone, but his was designed to be like that. It's a very special microphone that's designed to be very close to your mouth. It's almost unpoppable, isn't it? And there he is. But most people don't know how to use a headset. So if you do use a headset, just watch where that thing is.
Absolutely. Well, certainly that you need to make sure there's line of sight, that you can see your microphone. So there is a clear path between what's coming out of your mouth and the entry to the microphone, ideally. Don't get too close with a headset, as Paul has said. Ideal distance was as close as possible, but that doesn't mean talking right into it and getting close to the microphone that way. It just means if you have the ability to minimize distance to the microphone, it's a good thing to do, because the less distance between you there is, the less of other things will get picked up by the microphone relative to your voice. And if you can, get it in line with the camera. There is nothing worse than having fantastic sound whilst I'm talking to someone that's not you and appearing to be ignorant, or looking very closely at you and you can't see. And ideally, we want to kind of get the microphone in the right place and my gaze in the right direction as well, to be like a conversation if we were in a room together. That's the goal of this.
And the third one is this business of echo and stuff. Now I'm in a very echoey room. I couldn't resist it. The plumbing, I think, is beautiful. But you can get over acoustics if you're prepared to spend money. Now, the alternative, which I say to people, I do a lot of sound recording as a hobby to do with a radio station that I work with, and I do a lot of interviews, or sometimes I have to record something, and if I'm away from home, it's literally a question of, kneeling down, getting a whole load of cushions, pillows, any soft furnishings, and you can actually make a little recording studio almost everywhere. If you've got a hard desk, putting a blanket on the desk, or even blankets around you, if you have been told that you're in a very echoey place. That's kind of my cheap top tips. What about you?
Well, firstly, I can't believe you took a picture of my bathroom when you came to my house, but and used it in a webinar. No, I mean, a lot of people put headphones on because they're somewhere noisy, so you can't hear the person you're talking to. So we put headphones on, and now we can hear them, but they're still hearing everything in your environment. So that's a really important tip, is because you can now hear, because the noise isn't bothering you, it's probably bothering the person on the other end. So try and avoid those environments if you can. And you can, as Paul has said, you can do stuff in your room to try and minimize reflections. If you have to be in the echoey part of the house, try and sit somewhere, put some cushions around, or if you can, kind of better soundproof a part of the room, then definitely do that. But background noise and echo, the best thing with background noise is avoid it. But if you really, really can't, a good directional microphone will help you eradicate that. And as I said, I left my window open with traffic and my neighbour's dogs barking to try and give an idea. So if you heard that,
can't hear. Yep, absolutely nothing.
But there has been some noise going on, so hopefully you missed that, because I have a good directional microphone.
And fourthly, this is also something we're encouraging you to try and experiment with, or get used to the thought of actually speaking up and saying something. Now, what I want to call on a bit of history here, or at least storytelling history. There is a wide misconception, I think you probably suffered from this as well, Peter, that the workhouse owner, when Oliver went to ask for more, he wasn't actually objecting to the fact that Oliver was asking for more food. I've since learned that actually he was objecting to Oliver's poor microphone technique. And I've gone into the archives, and I think you can see that if you zoom in, you will actually find out that it was just poor microphone technique that let Oliver down. And so I just wanted to make that clear. But it's you should really say something about it. Don't let it grind you down. Particularly if, like yesterday, you said you were on, earlier this week, you were on calls for hours, and if the sound's lousy for hours, it is really going to grind you down.
Absolutely is, and do be brave. I don't think any of us want to be in a meeting where the person we're talking to isn't actually listening to what we're saying. It's a waste of everybody's time. So it's absolutely speak up. Absolutely.
And the last resort, although for me, being a bit of a geek, and I love a gadget, is to actually invest. And in fact, I have very recently invested in a number of these for my team, because all our work has gone online, and I thought this is really, really important. This is the way that we are communicating with the world now, and it's important that we can at least make it easy for people to interact with us, to hear us, to deal with us. So I just happened to buy a number of these. This is a little. There's also a version of this that you can plug straight into the bottom of your mobile phone, which is absolutely astonishing. So
lots of products for that. Yeah, absolutely. The fifth tip would be to invest in a quality microphone for the purpose. There's lots on the market, many on the market, and we have a good range of those. And you'll find them searching for podcasting, video conferencing microphones. There's many that are out there. I've used an MV7 today. What Paul has on screen is part of our Motive range, but there are many options. But do speak to a specialist, an audio specialist. There are many places to do that. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube of people doing microphone comparisons and testing them out for you. And something you really should do is, if you're talking to someone and they sound great, ask them what they're using. It's a great affirmation for people who have made their investment to know that people are enjoying the experience of talking to them and value that. It's important to know. And if you're talking to someone who sounds great and you're wondering how you sound, then ask them what they're using and get some tips that way.
So a most modern compliment. Gosh, you're sounding good today. And then who's going to, then you cannot be criticized for being politically incorrect, whether you're talking to a man or a woman. You're on safe territory. You sound great today. So this is time for some questions, I think. It's at that point of the webinar to hear questions, thoughts, experiences from you. As I said earlier, pop them into the Q&A pane, and we will do our best. I know I have to do my best, but Peter will actually have the answer. One thing that's come in from Nigel: funny how we would shut a window if there was a distracting noise at a face-to-face meeting. Perhaps being relaxed about people's visual background during lockdown, cats, children, not in work attire, piles of stuff, means we're being blasé about the sound too. That's an interesting thought. You've got an interesting, whilst some questions come in, you've got a really interesting story involving badgers, I seem to remember, Peter, in lighter. Badgers and poor sound. Not an immediate link that people would make, but go for it.
No, I met a very wonderful professional interpreter who's involved in some major events for language interpretation. He told me a story of one of the European courts or commissions, and there was a discussion about badger baiting, which I won't go into detail of. It's a horrible thing that was outlawed about 200 years ago. And of course, if you've never heard of it, neither had some of the people on this particular day. But the interpreter who was listening to what was being said didn't actually capture the whole conversation. So he was trying to fill in the words and didn't know what was missing when he came across the word something, young men arrested in the woods, something baiting. So he figured out what they might have been the missing word and interpreted it as what they'd been doing in the woods and been arrested for. What it actually was badger baiting, but that wasn't the word that sprang to mind. And the point of that story is that, you know, our brains have a whole bunch of stuff in there which Paul can explain more about, but it's processing power to realize you've made a mistake and then go back and try and correct it.
It's schema. We have these schema that fill in gaps to save ourselves mental energy. And so we fill in the gaps. Like if I were to say, bacon, and most people wouldn't say ham unless you're American. You say eggs. So we have things that we fill in, and everybody was a victim of that particular schema. So Nigel, again, in theory, would it be more pleasing or relaxing stroke natural if we were to listen to someone with some gentle background noise, something purposely piped through, perhaps played through a surround sound set at the other end? In other words, do you think our brains would feel more comfortable working at processing sound in a way that it finds more natural? Nigel, I'm assuming you're talking sort of like ambient, like, you know, bird song, or I don't know, something nice, a distant waterfall. Yes. Do you think what's your view on that, Peter? A bit of gentle, natural background sound.
If you know how to create it, absolutely. I mean, what we call reverberation and some of that natural echo is sometimes a good thing. But actually, when you're in a room with somebody, it's a good thing because it's part of direction. A lot of what actually allows us to understand things, everything we hear on a day-to-day basis has a whole amount of reflection included in there. But it allows us, again, it's part of determining what you want to listen to, what you don't want to listen to. So it's part of our general psyche. Unless you have a noise cancelling microphone, which is actively killing everything apart from your voice, typically, even though this is a directional mic I'm in now, there is a certain amount of pickup of bounced surfaces around me. So there's a natural ambience there. I would stop short of kind of grabbing some background noise of birds tweeting and other animals and household diversions at a lower level to kind of make it seem real. I wouldn't go that far, definitely not.
Kate asks, hi, do you have any tips on how to eradicate keyboard noise as people type whilst on calls? Often necessary, but I guess what you haven't said, Kate, really irritating.
It is. Directional microphones can help with that. And actually, if I just tap away on my keyboard now, I don't know how obvious that noise is, but I'm hitting the keys fairly hard while I'm talking to you, just to prove a point, just underneath my microphone.
Vaguely, but if you hadn't said, I wouldn't have known. I don't know if anybody else can hear that. No, I'm afraid your microphone is a bit too good. But interesting, you were on your high quality audio device or whatever it was.
Oh, I could switch back to that and hit my keys if you'd like.
High quality audio device.
Let me do that then, give you some ideas. So back on high definition audio.
She heard it clearly. Kate, you have ears like a bat.
Was it distracting? So I'm now on my high definition audio device. I'm going to do some
Oh, that's yeah.
While I'm talking to you. So that might actually be in the way, I'm not sure, of the conversation. I'm going to switch back and not subject you to that kind of challenging listening for too long.
What about, so Kevin says, I totally agree how much of a strain listening to poor quality audio can be. Out of interest, are these professional mics easy to plug into laptops, or do they still come with huge phono plugs? Well, can I answer that question? Because actually, I just went and bought myself a little, my latest little geeky piece, which is a very cool piece of kit. Yes, unfortunately, it is Shure again. I say unfortunately, Peter is much more reluctant to plug Shure than I am. I think they're marvelous. And basically, I can plug in a microphone that otherwise wouldn't be pluggable into straight to a laptop, but I can do it through that little box, and it is literally, you plug it together. There's no power, there's nothing. It just happens. But there are other devices, you know, some webcams have, you know, you've heard the webcam now, but I personally,
You've just switched off, Paul. Still off.
there we are. That should be back online.
Yes, you are back.
No, hang on. Yes, there we go. Don't tease me. So yes, but that wasn't that. It was my laptop. So yes. So actually, answer, Kevin. No, they don't need all the fancy stuff. But you know, you can get devices that are plug and play. Miranda asked, we've got a couple of minutes to go and quite a few more questions. If you have a webcam with a mic in it, can you still use a standalone directional mic too? How does it decide which mic picks up your voice? Good question, Miranda.
If we're talking conference calls, you have to.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
No.
That's interesting.
Yes, we can.
I thought you were messing around earlier.
Oh, you can hear me. So Nicola said you can hear me, but you can't hear me, Paul.
No, nothing at all.
Yes, I think everybody else can.
So what I can do, Miranda, while Peter's sorting out his sound, I have to say that the MV7 he has, which is an engineer's build, it is a little bit flaky because it's not a production model. Maybe it's that, and Peter did warn me that it might give out. It's so new, it's kind of a factory ready, not people ready. You can actually, when you go into the audio settings, Miranda, you can choose a separate webcam and separate sound. Yes, you can distinguish different webcams, different output, and different inputs. Pete Flynn says, it's my fault. Nigel Wood had something to say, coffee cups, etc. Yes. Liz says that I have hearing problems and find it difficult to filter out background noise. So the thought of adding in any other sounds would not be good for me. Yes, so that was to your waterfalls and twittering birds comment, Nigel. Now I'm wondering if we still have, now, yeah, Peter, your microphone is green. Are you having any more luck?
I'm fine. Apparently it's you,
No,
Paul.
absolutely, zippity doo dah.
It's you.
It's me. You can hear me? Yes. Oh, I'm going to have to answer. As far as I'm concerned here, on my screen, on my control panel, you are able to talk. I'm just messing around with it just in case, but I can't seem to change anything for you, Peter, I'm sorry to say. Of all the days, this is hilarious. Nigel, was it that on purpose? Nigel, can you, oh, everybody else can hear you both. Fine, it's me then, strangely. Bear with, so it is me. Okay, that's what you were trying to tell me. We can, everybody's saying. Okay, so it's me. Good, I'm pleased about that. So a couple of last questions. Okay, yeah, seriously, it's me. So yeah, so what could Liz do? Because if she's got hearing difficulties, is there anything more that she could do to make life easier for herself?
Well, headsets would help, obviously. I've already said I'm not a huge fan, but either earphones or headphones, or find a comfortable set of headphones to filter out background noise locally. If you're picking up a lot of background noise from the far end, it's what we said before, is talk to the person who's sending it and ask if they can, switch to a different microphone, do something different. That would be helpful. There's also a comment about adding in background noise, and just one thing I wanted to add, which I forgot to say, is that there's always the noise where you are. In this instance, where you're located and the noise around you remains. So just adding in someone else's voice is just their voice. If you think about that from a conversational standpoint, if they were in the room with you, the background noise is in your room, not from their room. So adding in someone else's noise is not ideal. So add in their voice, and just their voice if you can, and then that comes into your environment. So the background noise in that sense is yours, and that doesn't go away. Unless you do have a totally deadened soundproof dry, clear voice coming in might be quite odd, but I don't think that's the case for most of us.
Great. I think that's about it. Any other questions for Peter while we still have him? And indeed, when my device accidentally became unplugged, something happened in my computer which stopped me being able to hear anything. That has never happened before, if you believe me. So there we are. I think that's probably it. Maybe we should just do a couple of minutes on some sort of summary, perhaps. And let me take Mr. Badger off.
I'm happy to just sum up a couple of things, Paul.
Yep, indeed. So I've got final thoughts. Firstly, yeah.
Yes. Say something. Speak up. My biggest tip is speak up about what you're hearing and let people know. And also speak up about asking for feedback as to how you sound. And ask people to be honest. If you don't want to do that with a client or your boss or a customer or something, then just do that with a friend or a trusted colleague first, just to find out how you do sound. And of course, don't assume that because you sounded great when you checked it out from your quiet room of your house, that that's the same wherever you go. So if you do have 2 or 3 places where you would conference call from, then check them all out. Second thing is that, so much of these conversations are business and work related. So clearly there's important content. And I'm sure that in most cases that content is valuable. So we kind of get onto the last point is, you want to invest in something because it would make sense, right? So to actually justify the time you're spending talking to someone to make that conversation work, the cost of microphones and just investing some time making it sound right is absolutely worthwhile, absolutely worthwhile. And I think all of us want to be remembered for the things that we've said. Some of the biggest speeches in time and the things we recall the most, whether they're momentous events, good and bad, have typically come to us via a microphone. So it's definitely worth the investment. If you think that what you have to say is just as important as a president or a prime minister or a religious leader, whichever it may be, or even a politician, God forbid, I'm sure what you have to say is equally important, if not more so, in your life. And it's definitely worth the investment to make sure you sound right and people are hearing you clearly.
Indeed. Peter, I just have to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful. This is a long overdue conversation. We've been talking about doing something like this literally for years. So thank you also to everybody who posted questions, and so many of you who tried to get me to shut up and realized that actually it was me who had the sound problem. And thank you to Nicola, as always, in the background. She's the one who does all the invitations and makes sure that you get to the right place at the right time and that the tech works. So I wish everybody an excellent weekend. And again, Peter, thank you so much. And see you soon, and take care of yourselves and stay safe.